Hello and welcome to Film Physicality. In this video, I'll be ranking the top 50 horror movies on Netflix. Let's get to it. So yeah, I've watched a lot of horror movies on Netflix, so I figured I would rank the top 50. Of course, this is my personal list, and you're probably not going to agree with it. And if you don't agree, let me know what your favorites are and what your list would be like. If there are horror movies that are not on this list, it's probably because I didn't like them, but it is possible that I didn't watch them. So let me know if you think that there's a movie that should be here and I'll check it out. Starting out at the bottom of the list, at number 50, Eli is about a boy receiving treatment for his autoimmune disorder when he discovers that the house he's living in isn't as safe as he thought. This starts out pretty good, and the ghost scenes I think are done very well, but it goes downhill on the second half, with the ending making most of the movie not make sense. The graduating class at Osborne High is being targeted by an assailant while wearing a lifelike mask of their own face. There's Someone Inside Your House is directed by Patrick Bryce, who also directed the Creep movies. Even though this is very predictable and everyone's actions in the movie are super dumb, I think it's still pretty enjoyable. At number 48, Hypnotic is about a young woman seeking self-improvement, enlisting the help of a renowned hypnotherapist. But after a handful of intense sessions, she discovers unexpected and deadly consequences. In my opinion, this has pretty lazy writing and plot holes, but it's interesting enough, and with a good performance from Kate Siegel. I Am the Pretty Thing That Lives in the House is a drama horror directed by Oz Perkins, who also directed The Black Hole's Daughter and Gretel and Hansel. It involves a young nurse taking care of an elderly author who lives in a haunted house. This has a great atmosphere and very beautiful shots, but it's way too slow without a very good payoff. At number 46, I then have The Birds. This focuses on a series of sudden and unexplained violent bird attacks on the people of Bodega Bay, California over the course of a few days. And yeah, I know, how dare I put an Alfred Hitchcock film so low. But in my opinion, this for the most part was pretty dull and boring, wasting too much time on irrelevant dramas. It does have some good things though, like good suspense near the end and the way it uses sound effects without music, which is very interesting too. At number 45, The Wretched is about a rebellious teenage boy struggling with his parents' imminent divorce, and he encounters a terrifying evil after his next-door neighbor becomes possessed. This is interesting in the way it presents his story, with a nice plot twist and some creepy scenes. But too many plot holes and loose ends keep me from ranking it higher. After an attack renders her blind, a woman withdraws from the world to recover, but soon she plunges into paranoia, unable to convince anyone that her assailant has returned. Sightless is not without its flaws. It can also be slow at times and maybe a bit predictable, but it keeps you interested enough to see it play out. When Cole stays up late past his bedtime, he discovers that his hot babysitter belongs to a satanic cult that will stop at nothing to keep him quiet. The Babysitter is an over-the-top horror comedy that's pretty dumb and ridiculous, but it is a very fun ride of ridiculousness. It's directed by MCG, who also directed the Charlie's Angels movies and Terminator Salvation. At number 42, I then have Countdown. This is about a nurse that downloads an app that predicts the user's exact time of death. With this, she discovers that she has 3 days to beat the clock and change her fate. It's reminiscent of early 2000s films like Final Destination, with the cheesiness included. It is overall a pretty fun movie, but not without its flaws. Paranormal Activity was a worldwide phenomenon when it came out, where a couple becomes increasingly disturbed by a nightly demonic presence. And while there's too many scenes where nothing really is going on, the parts that work do work. And I remember it scared the crap out of everyone back in the day. And it started a pretty solid franchise too. Now getting to the top 40 movies on this list. Phenomena is about 3 middle-aged women who investigate paranormal events and are put to the test when their leader disappears. This is a horror comedy that is surprisingly very funny. The first act especially is just hilarious. It does go a bit downhill though when it tries to be serious. In the starving aftermath of a nuclear disaster, a family of 3 attends a charitable event at a hotel, which takes a dark turn when people start to disappear. Cadaver is a Norwegian horror that has a very intriguing premise, and that's also very fun to see play out. In my opinion, the third act gets pretty messy though. At number 38, in No One Gets Out Alive, an immigrant in search of the American dream is forced to take a room in a boarding house and soon finds herself in a nightmare from which she can't escape. This drags a bit at times, but it has a pretty creepy and supernatural vibe, and also a pretty crazy ending. An American nanny is shocked that her new English family's boy is actually a life-size doll. After she violates a list of strict rules, disturbing events make her believe that the doll is really alive. The Boy is directed by William Brent Bell, who also directed the recent Orphan First Kill. This one is pretty creepy with a good plot twist, but it can drag at times as well. Connected by phone in the same home but 20 years apart, a serial killer puts another woman's past and her life on the line to change her own fate. The Call is a South Korean science fiction horror where the whole time travel plot is filled with plot holes, but at the same time, if you can't look past that, the time travel plot also makes for very fun and unique situations. At number 35, I have Resident Evil. On this video game adaptation, when a virus leaks from a top-secret facility, turning all resident researchers into zombies, the government sends an elite military task force to contain the outbreak. It is a flawed, overly stylized action horror that is dated, but still as fun now as it was in my teenage years. At number 34, I then have Blood Red Sky. This is about a woman with a mysterious illness that is forced into action when a group of terrorists attempt to hijack a transatlantic overnight flight. This is probably a bit longer than it needs to be, but it's still a fun and engaging horror thriller. At number 33, Dawn of the Dead is an action horror directed by Zack Snyder, who of course directed Watchmen, some of the DC movies, and a lot others. A group of survivors take refuge in a shopping mall after the world is taken over by aggressive flesh-eating zombies. This is a very fun film overall, with an awesome first act, but an underwhelming ending in my opinion. Also, this movie was just recently added to Netflix, which reminds me, I'm making this video in May of 2023, and so depending on when you watch, some movies might have been added and some may have been removed. Creep is a found footage style horror directed by Patrick Bryce. A young vlogger answers an online ad for a one-day job in a remote town to record the last messages of a dying man. When he notices the man's odd behavior, he starts to question his intentions. While I kinda expected it to lead to a bit more, it's still a very fun and especially unique found footage film. A woman is left handcuffed to her dead husband as a part of a sick revenge plot. Unable to unshackle, she has to survive as two killers arrive to finish her off. This is a very fun horror thriller starring Megan Fox, and she gives a great and enjoyable performance. We're now at the top 30, and Incantation is about a woman that was cursed 6 years ago after breaking a religious taboo. Now she must protect her daughter from the consequences of her actions. This one is very interesting in how it involves the viewer of the found footage. It also has a lot of creepy scenes, with some that are pretty difficult to watch. It might be overstuffed and unbelievable at times though. A woman wakes in a cryogenic chamber with no recollection of how she got there. As she's running out of oxygen, she must rebuild her memory to find a way out of her nightmare. Oxygen is directed by Alexandre Aja, who also directed Crawl, The Hills Have Eyes remakes, and some others. And while this drags a lot during the middle parts, it's also very fun to see this play out, especially for that great third act reveal. At number 28, The Trip is a horror comedy directed by Tommy Wirkola, who also directed Violent Night. A couple retreat to a lakeside cabin in search of reconnecting, but the husband plans to murder his wife on the cabin. But when he tries, some crazy plot twists start to occur. This is a surprisingly fun film, with great comedy, lots of fun gore, and some interesting plot twists like I said. An artist relocates to the Hudson Valley and begins to suspect that her marriage has a sinister darkness, one that even rivals her new home's history. Things Heard and Seen is a horror mystery focusing more on the domestic noir, but within a supernatural or ghost story, and I think it works well, and I find this one to be a bit underrated. In Lights Out, Rebecca must unlock the terror behind her little brother's experiences that once tested her sanity, bringing her face to face with a supernatural spirit attached to their mother. This is directed by David F. Sandberg, who also directed the Shazam movies and Annabelle Creation. And sure, this one has flaws and is filled with jump scares, but I still find this one to be a lot of fun, and some of the jump scares do somewhat work. At number 25, I Know What You Did Last Summer is about four young friends bound by a tragic accident, and they are reunited when they find themselves being stalked by a hook-wielding maniac in their small seaside town. And yeah, this is simply just one of those 90s slashers that I grew up with, and that now functions as a comfort movie. And it has lots of good cheesy fun. After a couple finds a traumatized child of unknown origins, the wife must decipher the girl's strange behaviors to unlock her identity and dark past. The ChalkLine, also known as Howla, is a Spanish horror that's a bit of a hidden gem, with a unique story, a great atmosphere, intrigue, and mystery. At number 23, The Ritual is directed by David Bruckner, who also directed The Night House, which is a film that I absolutely loved. It is about a group of old college friends that reunite for a trip to a forest in Sweden, but there they encounter a menacing presence stalking them. This is a film with very beautiful shots and some very creepy scenes. I personally didn't love the ending though, but I know a lot of people did. In 1905, a drifter on a dangerous mission to rescue his kidnapped sister tangles with a sinister religious cult on an isolated island. Apostle is directed by Gareth Evans, who interestingly enough also directed The Raid and The Raid 2, which are martial arts films. And so, this is a folk horror mystery that is unique in having very good fight sequences, but without taking away from having pretty scary and tense moments. Two couples on an oceanside getaway grow suspicious that the host of their seemingly perfect rental house may be spying on them. Before long, what should have been a celebratory weekend trip turns into something far more sinister. The Rental is directed by Dave Franco, who of course is a well-known actor. And this is a very fun movie that has surprisingly good acting, and is one of the few that will make you terrified at vacation house rentals. The top 20 is started off with I See You. When a 12-year-old boy goes missing, a lead investigator struggles to balance the pressure of the investigation and troubles with his wife. He then uncovers a malicious presence lurking in the crevices of his family's already broken home. This is a pretty unnerving horror thriller with great twists, and if you haven't seen it, you should definitely go into it blind. 5 years after an ominous unseen presence drives most of society to suicide, a mother and her 2 children make a desperate bid to reach safety. Birdbox is directed by Susanne Bier, and while it is more of a suspense thriller than a horror, the horror of the unknown is definitely there. Plus, it also does a great job at building suspense. At number 18, I have Creep 2. And yes, I did like the second one a lot more than the first one. On the second one, a woman does online videos of her comforting lonely men, but has not found success. When she meets Joseph after seeing his ad for video work, she believes she has found the perfect subject for her videos. This one is also directed by Patrick Bryce, and you can feel how he now is more confident on what he is doing, and overall turns out to be just a very fun movie. The Perfection is about a troubled musical prodigy who seeks out the new star pupil of her former school, and the encounter sends both musicians down a sinister path with shocking consequences. While I do get that this has some flaws, I did have lots of fun with it. I enjoyed all the twists and especially enjoyed the crazy first half. In 1991 Madrid, after holding a seance at school, a teen girl minding her young siblings at home suspects an evil force has entered their apartment. Veronica is a Spanish horror film directed by Paco Plaza, who co-directed the Rec movies. This was marketed as the scariest film ever when it came out, and while that is definitely not true, it is still very effective. While it does have a few jump scares, it doesn't rely too heavily on them, and does rely more on other things like the score. A couple adopt an orphan child whose dreams and nightmares manifest physically as he sleeps. Before I Wake is directed by Mike Flanagan, who also directed Dr. Sleep, Hush, Oculus, The Haunting of Hill House, and a lot others. And this is my least favorite of Flanagan's work, but with it being pretty high on the list, you can probably tell how much I like his films. It does have a few flaws, but it is still a very good film, with a good heartfelt story. Under the Shadow is a Persian horror directed by Babak Anvari, who also directed I Came By. This is about a mother and daughter who struggle to cope with the terrors of the post-revolution when a mysterious evil begins to haunt their home. So this is set in an apartment in the middle of a war zone, and the director really uses that to his advantage, using it to create extra tension and claustrophobia apart from the horror inside the apartment. At number 13, I have His House. This is about a young refugee couple who, after making a harrowing escape from war-torn South Sudan, they struggle to adjust to their new life in a small English town that has an unspeakable evil lurking beneath the surface. This is a slow burn horror that explores trauma and grief in a very unique way, while also giving us some pretty terrifying scenes. During a mysterious thunderstorm, a young mother manages to save a life in danger, but her good deed causes a disturbing chain of unexpected consequences. Mirage, or Durante la Tormenta, is a Spanish mystery thriller directed by Oriol Paulo, who also directed The Invisible Guest. It's not really a horror, but close enough that I'll include it here. And while it's easier to predict than his other films, it's still very intriguing and keeps you glued to the screen to see how it plays out. God's Crooked Lines, or Los Renglones Torcidos de Dios, is about a private investigator who pretends to be mentally ill in order to enter a psychiatric hospital and gather evidence for the case she is working on: the death of a patient in unclear circumstances. This is also directed by Oriol Paulo, and is also more on the thriller and mystery side than horror. But this is a film that just keeps the mystery going throughout, while adding plot twist over plot twist. Okay, finally at the top 10, and for number 10 I have the Fear Street trilogy. And I'm combining all these into one, even though it's 3 different movies. The trilogy starts when a circle of teenage friends accidentally encounter an ancient evil responsible for a series of brutal murders that have plagued their town for over 300 years. I really love how each of these are set in a different decade, and each of them are directed in the style of famous horror movies from that decade. My favorite is definitely the second one, but all three of them I consider to be very fun. A classic horror story is about five strangers who are traveling in southern Italy. They become stranded in a forest with just a wooden house in the middle of a clearing. This is a very fun Italian horror that I believe is a must-watch for any horror fan, and it has quite a few plot twists that will keep you on your toes. A Phoenix secretary embezzles money from her employer's clients, goes on the run, and checks into a remote hotel run by a young man under the domination of his mother. Psycho is directed by Alfred Hitchcock, and it's considered by some to be a cinematic masterpiece. It breaks the traditional format and redefined the genre. I really enjoy the pacing on this one, which makes it hard to look away. I'm Thinking of Ending Things is directed by Charlie Kaufman, who wrote Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind and Adaptation. Full of misgivings, a young woman travels with her new boyfriend to his parents' secluded farm. Upon arriving, she comes to question everything she thought she knew about him and herself. While this one is slow, it is also a very mind-bending psychological horror mystery that stays in your mind long after the film is over. At number 6, Cam is about an ambitious cam girl who wakes up one day to discover that she's been replaced on her own show with an exact replica of herself. This is directed by Daniel Goldhaber, which I'm not sure if I'm saying right, but this is a very unique and original movie with great tension that will keep you feeling anxious all throughout the film. A dense cloud of mist envelops a small town, trapping people inside a local grocery store. They soon discover that the mist conceals deadly horrors that threaten their lives and worse, their sanity. The Mist is directed by Frank Darabont, who also directed The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile. This is a good horror thriller that explores people having to deal with fear and panic while being trapped together. It also has one of the most harsh endings ever put on film. Ouija, Origin of Evil is about a widowed mother and her two daughters who add a new stunt to bolster their Xenon scam business and unwittingly invite an authentic evil into their home. This is another one that is directed by Mike Flanagan, and not to be confused with the first Ouija. This one is 10 times better and shouldn't even be tied to the other. It has genuinely scary scenes, mostly thanks to the awesome child acting from Lulu Wilson. Okay, so we've now made it to my top 3 favorite movies from the movies currently on Netflix. Crimson Peak follows an aspiring author who travels to a remote Gothic mansion with her new husband and his sister. There, she must decipher the mystery behind the ghostly visions that haunt her new home. This is directed by Guillermo del Toro, who is one of my favorite directors. He also directed Pan's Labyrinth, The Devil's Backbone, Nightmare Alley, and others. And this one is very underrated in my opinion. Sure, it's not straight up horror, with it also being a romantic drama, but the story, creativity, and atmosphere are really something to admire in this. I am a sucker for ghost stories though, so that might have something to do with me liking it more than most. In Gerald's game, a couple tries to spice up their marriage in a remote lake house. After the husband dies unexpectedly, the wife is left handcuffed to her bed frame and must fight to survive and break free. This one is directed by Mike Flanagan as well, and the premise by itself is already very intriguing, but the way everything is executed is just amazing. It's a thriller turned horror that keeps the suspense going all throughout the film, along with an awesome performance by Carla Gugino. Definitely my favorite Netflix original. I guess it's too bad for them that they lost Flanagan. And my favorite film currently on Netflix is It Follows. This is about a young woman who is followed by an unknown supernatural force after sleeping with her new boyfriend. This is directed by David Robert Mitchell, and it's a very unique and very well made horror film. It has a great story, a great score, and atmosphere that really immerses you in it, along with some pretty tense scenes as well. And it's the type of scary that stays with you long after watching the movie. And that's it for my list of top 50 horror movies on Netflix. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please remember to give me a like and a subscribe. And again, let me know if you agree with the list, if you don't agree, what movies you would have put here that are missing, and what movies I ranked high that you didn't like. And again, like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.